Welcome to the debate. Today, we are taking a scalpel to a very specific, very intense piece of curriculum. It's the Game Mechanics Fundamentals course and the accompanying SportX GoSu 8-week delivery plan.
Right.
Now, to someone who's not familiar, this might just look like a guide on how to play video games, but if you actually read through it, the lesson plans, the drill charts, the sheer breakdown of hours, it is something else entirely. It's a blueprint designed to take players of Battle Royale games like, PUBG, Free Fire, and Call of Duty Mobile from what the text calls noob to pro. But beneath all that, there's this fundamental tension about what actually creates a winner.
And it's a tension that has existed since the dawn of the genre, really. It brings us to a single central question. Does the primary path to victory lie in movement mastery, the raw twitch reflex muscle memory of your hands, or is it defined by positioning and map sense, the cold, tactical decision-making of the mind?
I'm taking the stance that mechanical execution is the non-negotiable floor of skill. You can have all the big brain theories you want, but this 8-week course delivery plan, it makes it crystal clear. Without the muscle memory to win a one-on-one duel or the speed to loot efficiently, your grand strategy is just a daydream. You're dead before you can even make a decision.
And I look at the exact same text, and honestly, I come to the opposite conclusion. I believe the source material proves that game sense is the ceiling that truly matters. The text explicitly states that, and I'm quoting here, most fights are won before shots are fired. That suggests that intellectual advantages, knowing where to be, why you're there, predicting the enemy, it just supersedes any amount of, mechanical gymnastics.
That's a nice sentiment, but let's look at the reality of the curriculum. This isn't a theory book. It's a training manual. If you look at that 8-week course delivery plan, the executive summary highlights skill development as the absolute first pillar. It notes that each core mechanic, strafing, recoil control, sliding, requires 1 to 2 weeks specifically to build proper muscle memory. They recommend 40+ hours of practice outside the classroom. Why would they demand that much physical repetition? Because in the heat of combat, conscious thought is simply too slow.
Too slow? You think the brain just can't keep up?
I know it can't. The average human reaction time is what, 250 milliseconds? When you're being fired upon in a game like Call of Duty Mobile, you cannot pause to calculate map geometry. You have to rely on these deeply internalized physical skills. The curriculum starts with movement mastery for a reason. It details techniques like strafing, jumping, sliding, not as optional flourishes, but as survival necessities. Look at the data in the strafing section. Proper, random strafing causes enemies to miss 30 to 50% more shots. That is a massive statistical advantage. You cannot outthink a bullet that's already in the air. You have to physically dodge it.
Okay, that's a compelling argument for the micro moment. I'll give you that. For the split second where you're already in trouble. But I think you're missing the macro picture. I don't buy that mechanics are the foundation. I would argue they're merely the tool, and the mind is the hand that wields it. Let's look at the 5 golden rules listed at the very end of the material. This is the summary of everything. Rule number 1 is explicitly, position is greater than aim. Position, aim. That's not ambiguous. It doesn't say position is nice to have. It says it is superior.
It's a catchy rule, sure. Looks good on a slide. But does it hold up against the physics of a fire fact when someone's slide cancels around a corner at you?
It holds up precisely because of the physics. The material dedicates an entire section to rule number 1, high ground wins. It lists the advantages: better vision, a smaller target profile, easier headshots because of gravity and angles. These are passive advantages. They require no mechanical input to sustain. If I'm on a rooftop and you are in the street below, I don't need to be faster than you, I just need to be there. The text even explains the geometry. When you're shooting down, the head hitbox is a larger percentage of what you see. When you're shooting up, you're fighting gravity and bullet drop. Smart movement is just better than fast movement. A player who understands where to be doesn't need to dodge 50% of shots because they aren't getting shot at in the first place.
I think you're idealizing the game state a little bit. You're talking about the scenario where you already have the high ground. But battle royales are chaotic. They are random. You don't always start on the roof. You have to get there. And getting there, that requires mechanics. Let's dig into the philosophy of movement presented in Section 1. The text outlines 4 types of movement: strafing, jumping, crouching, and sliding, and it emphasizes that the best players mix movements constantly.
I agree they mix them, but the question is why? What's the intent? Are they moving to look cool for a highlight reel, or are they moving to survive?
They are moving to be impossible to hit. The guide discusses advanced techniques like bunny hopping and jump shots. It explicitly says these are used to surprise enemies. It mentions jump peeking to gather information. These are complex physical inputs. The Esporte plan demands hours and hours of homework to master these. If you cannot execute a jump peek, which involves jumping to quickly see over cover and then landing back in safety, you literally cannot gather information safely. The intellectual act of gathering info is gated behind the physical act of the jump. If your hands feel, your brain gets no data. Simple as that.
I think you're overvaluing the gymnastics of it all. I look at that same section on movement and I see cover rules. The text warns, don't stand right next to cover. It advises you to stand a bit back so you can peek more quickly. That isn't a mechanical feat. That's just spatial awareness. It's discipline. The text focuses on jiggle peeking, not as a way to show off speed, but as a specific loop. You peek, you see the enemy, you duck back. Now you know where they are, and they don't know you know. It's an information gathering tool. The mechanical difficulty of moving left and right slightly is, well, it's negligible. The skill is knowing when to do it and managing your distance from the wall.
But can we really say the mechanical difficulty is negligible? I mean, have you tried to execute a perfect jiggle peek while under fire? The text warns about the common mistake in strafing, moving in a predictable pattern. It suggests a random strafing pattern, left for half a second, switch right, maybe left, left, right. It requires keeping your crosshair on the target while your own body moves erratically. That is a high-level coordination challenge. If you do it rhythmically, you die. And consider the quote the source uses: "I'd rather have a teammate with average aim and great movement than great aim and bad movement." The text frames this as a clear win from movement mastery.
I noticed that quote too, but you have to interpret movement in context of the golden rules. Movement there, I'd argue, refers to macro movement, your positioning on the map. You see movement and you think of a player bunny hopping across a field like a maniac. I see movement and I think of someone rotating to the zone efficiently. The text links good movement to better positioning. If your great movement just gets you to a bad spot faster, you're just dying sooner.
But the section is literally illustrated with diagrams of strafing patterns and slide cancels. It's discussing the micromechanics of the body, not the macromechanics of the map. It even mentions slide canceling specifically for Call of Duty as a pro technique. I mean, this is an unintended mechanic, a glitch that became a feature. Mastering that requires a distinct rhythm and muscle memory. The text says to practice this until it's automatic. If you're thinking about the slide cancel, you're already dead. It has to be instinct.
Okay, let's concede that the actual firefight requires mechanics. But combat is only, 10% of the game? Maybe less. The other 90% is preparation, looting, rotation. Let's talk about looting and economy. This is where the gap between Twitch and brain really widens.
Actually, I think this is where speed is even more critical. The guide proposes a 30-second rule. It states a player must be combat ready, meaning gun, ammo, and armor, within 30 seconds of landing. That is a speed metric. It's pure efficiency. The text explicitly advises to use auto pickup settings and don't compare every item, grab and go. These are mechanical efficiencies designed to buy time. If you're fumbling in menus or staring at the ground reading item descriptions, you die. Speed is the survival metric.
But is it speed or is it decision-making discipline? The section is titled Priority Speed Loadouts, but look at the biggest mistake listed. It's looting for 5+ minutes looking for perfect gear. The error described there isn't that the player's fingers were too slow, it's that their mind was too greedy or indecisive. The correction is mental. Don't overloot, go fight. The text is fighting against the psychological urge to hoard. The grab-and-go mentality is a discipline, not a reflex.
But to grab and go requires familiarity with the loot UI. Rapid identification. You have to visually process ground loot instantly. You need to be able to navigate your inventory menu while you're sprinting.
True, but look at the counterpoint provided by the audio cue section. This is where the mechanics of speedrun head first into the wall of game sense. The text says, doors looting. Sounds reveal enemy locations. A player who is obsessed with speed sprinting through houses, smashing doors open, auto-looting everything, is just a giant noise machine. A smart player, using the audio cues outlined in the Game Sense section, is just listening. The guide says, skip low-tier items if you hear footsteps. That is a tactical override of the mechanical process. The text essentially warns that the fastest looter is often just delivering high-tier loot to the smartest camper. You speedrun your looting phase just to die to someone sitting in a corner listening to your footsteps.
That's a fair point about audio. But let's talk about the moment that camper gets found. Let's talk about aggression. Section 4, Combat Fundamentals, it gives clear criteria for pushing. You push when an enemy is cracked, their armor is broken, or reloading, or you have a numbers advantage. But how do you push? The text says, use utility, slide sprint in, commit fully.
Committing fully is a mindset. That's courage.
But the execution is mechanical. It mentions aggressive slides and slide canceling again. When you decide to push, the game sense part of your brain is effectively done. Now you have to execute. If you try to push a cracked enemy but you can't slide shoot effectively, which the text says to practice until it is muscle memory, you lose your advantage. You might have the right idea. You might know they're reloading. But if your hands can't deliver the message, the strategy fails. The intention to kill doesn't kill. The bullets do.
You're right that execution matters once the decision is made, but the decision itself is the filter that prevents suicide. Let's look at the ultimate arbiter of the game, the zone. The zone and rotation section highlights zone timing. It says in phase 5 and above, move immediately. Zone hurts a lot.
That seems like basic survival. I mean, everyone knows the zone hurts.
It's basic, yet it's listed as a fundamental because so many players, even mechanically gifted ones, fail at it constantly. They get greedy for kills. The text contrasts edge play versus early rotate. Edge play is described as risky, more kills, while early rotate is safer, more control. This is a purely strategic calculation. If you are caught in a phase 5 zone, it doesn't matter how good your slide cancel is. You are taking tick damage that ruins your aim, your screen is flashing red, and you're panic running. No amount of strafing saves you from bad zone rotation. The zone is a mechanic you cannot outplay with movement.
But the text also mentions reading the kill feed in that same section.
Exactly. Kill feed analysis is perhaps the highest form of game sense mentioned. The text says the feed tells you who is fighting and what weapons they have. Think about that for a second. If I see 3 people die to a sniper rifle in the north, I know there is a sniper in the north. I am not pushing north, regardless of my mechanical ability. Game sense and IQ is about predicting plays. The material says the difference between good and great players is game sense. You can't mechanically dodge a sniper shot you didn't even know was coming.
It says that, but it wraps right back around to good movement equals harder to hit plus better positioning equals more wins. You can't separate them so easily. I would argue that game sense is the ceiling, sure, but mechanics are the floor. You can have the highest IQ in the world knowing exactly where the enemy will be. But when you turn that corner, if you miss your shots and they hit theirs because they're strafing and you're standing still, you lose. The game ultimately resolves through the barrel of a gun. You can't position your way out of a missed shot in a final circle duel.
And I would argue that if I have high ground and cover, and you are strafing in the open, I win 9 times out of 10. The text supports this. The geometry of the game favors the positioned player so heavily that it compensates for mechanical deficiency. If I only have to hit your head, because that's all I can see, and you have to hit my head while I'm behind a wall, well, the math is just on my side.
Yet, even the retreat requires mechanics. What happens when you lose that high ground, or the zone forces you off? The text advises on retreating. Smoke your escape, run unpredictably, use cover-to-cover movement. Running unpredictably is a mechanical skill. It requires breaking the habit of running in a straight line, which the text identifies as a stop-doing item. The ability to execute a chaotic retreat is what buys you the chance to reset and use that game sense again. Run in a straight line, you're dead before you find the next rock.
You know, we're circling the same truth from different altitudes here.
Perhaps? Let's look at the Sporte Gosu Academy structure one last time. It's built on progressive learning. Students layer skills. Week 1 is introduction. Week 2 might be movement. The curriculum implies a hierarchy where the body must be trained before the mind can be fully utilized. You can't teach a student to flank if they can't walk without running into a wall. The delivery plan is literally structured to drill the mechanics first.
Or it implies that the body just takes longer to train, so you have to start early, while the mind is being sharpened constantly throughout the whole process. The 5 golden rules I keep coming back to. Position aim is number 1. Info equals advantage is number 2. Stay calm always is number 5. These are mental states. You can beat 80% of players simply by not making mistakes, like fighting in the open or ignoring the zone. The text literally says, practice these fundamentals and beat 80% of players. That implies the majority of the player base is losing because they're making stupid mistakes, not because they can't aim.
I think we can agree that the source material presents a duality. It promises that these fundamentals can transform a player from, well, noob to pro.
Indeed, and it seems to suggest that while the hands do the work, the mind chooses the work to be done.
As we wrap this up, I want to reaffirm my stance. The Sports Gosu Academy dedicates its time, its most valuable resource, to building muscle memory. 40-plus hours of homework, slide canceling, random strafing, recoil control. These are the barriers to entry. If you cannot physically keep up with the speed of the game, strategy it's just a daydream. You need the foundation of movement mastery to even participate in the tactical conversation.
And I maintain that the 5 golden rules are the true north of this curriculum. The game is won by the player who makes the fewest mistakes, not the one who moves the fastest. Information, audio cues, and zone timing allow a thoughtful player to dismantle a mechanically superior opponent who lacks discipline. As the text says regarding high ground, if it's not me, I either get it or disengage. That is a decision, not a reflex.
It is interesting, though, that both sides agree on one thing: the pro mindset.
Yes. Before every fight, I ask, who has high ground?
But once that question is answered, the execution has to follow. The best players, as the text notes, mix movements constantly, while also predicting plays.
Exactly. Mastering both the hands and the mind. You need the hand to get you to the position that the mind selected.
It seems the source material doesn't let us pick just one, even if we prefer to. It demands a synthesis of both.
And that brings us to the end of this debate. We've dissected the Sporte Gosu curriculum and the game mechanics fundamentals. Whether you believe victory comes from the perfect slide cancel or the perfect zone rotation, the material is clear. There is always more to learn.
And likely, plenty of homework to do.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to The Debate. We hope this discussion has sharpened your understanding of the skills required to dominate in Battle Royale.